France is trying to control their oil industry, which is no big surprise because as their economic policy, just like the United States of zero interest rates and free money, comes to an end, and we live with the consequences of shutting down the economy. There's all kinds of distortions. One of the biggest distortions is in the energy industry. One thing to understand, and I kind of have thought through the last couple of years, the government really can't create supply. They can subsidize it. They can pretend like they're doing with ESG and green energy, but that doesn't create supply necessarily. That otherwise, because the free market, you, me, if green energy was more dense, cheaper, would you buy it? Would if it lowered your energy bill and it was just as good, would you buy it? Most people would, right? So that's a solution to a problem. Expensive energy, oil, fossil fuels, etc. It's not a solution to a problem to take money from you and give it to these companies, and it's not more dense and not cheaper. They pretend it is by taking money from you and tax money from you and giving it to them, but it's not. So it doesn't actually solve the problem of giving you cheaper, more dense energy. So now we have Yahoo News coming out with a story. This is from Bloomberg, actually. But Macron says France to ask oil industry to sell fuels at cost. This is just one step closer to price controls. And as we talked about on this channel many, many times, price controls don't work. All they do is create a shortage. Yet, this is what they're doing. So what would happen? Let switch moccasins for a second. You're the oil baron, or you run a company, and they say, hey, your margins are too high. You need to lower your cost and sell only at cost, no profit for you. What do you think would be the knock-on effects of that decree? Can anybody say shortage and supply? Yes, shortage and supply. Okay, in the desire to create more, because it's the price going up that incentivizes people to invest in that industry because they can make money. It's just they're shooting themselves in the foot, or stabbing you in the back and blaming you for bleeding on their knife. It's just really bad. So, anyways, further reading. France has put on hold previous plans to allow gas stations to sell at a loss. At a loss. Oh, wow. Amid pushback from small operators, Macron said he would keep that as a threat, so he'll threaten. So, again, knock-on effects. What would happen if he says, you must work and not get paid? You must work and not get paid. Because if they're operating at a loss, that means they can't pay their employees. So you must work and not get paid. Now, if people choose not to work, that means zero supply. Absolutely zero. And then when the government comes in and enforces that again, we're getting into slave labor territory when they're saying, you will operate at a loss. You will work 40 hours a week, yada, yada, yada. And these are the options that the politicians have. All they can do is gum up the system. They don't want to say, yeah, we screwed up back there and we're living with the consequences of it. And the best thing to do is step back, take off regulation, let the free market and supply come online. No. Can't do that. So Macron said he would keep that as a threat. However, when Prime Minister Elizabeth Warren meets with all players in the sector this week to demand greater transparency on margins and request they sell at cost. How do you think that's going to work out? I mean, you can have your opinion on what oil companies should do, but if you're the only oil company, and because of massive regulation and they're trying to divest out of fossil fuels, you're the only oil company in existence, or one of two, demand goes up and the supply coming into Europe is going down because of Russia and Ukraine. What can you do? If demand's going up and you don't have the supply to meet demand, how do you mitigate that? Well, I don't know, price. And just price is just not a signal that these politicians are comfortable with. And believe me, this is going to make the problem worse, just like when we had gas lines in the 1970s in the United States. Hey, why don't we just make it illegal? Why don't we think of that? We'll make it illegal for your prices to go up. Genius. Genius, Macron. That is great stuff. Further reading, there's one thing we can take action on, and that is acting on abusive margins in refining, Macron said Sunday evening in an interview with TF1 and France 2 TV channels. Now, ask yourself this. What is an abusive margin? What is the proper margin for oil companies? Is it 10%? 20%? Then then ask yourself, what's the tax rate in France? This is what's so insidious and gross about governments, is because they can have a top marginal tax rate of 90% and then go, hey, free market company, you can't, there's a cap on how much money you can make on your industry. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some free market actors who I wouldn't call it abusive, opportunists maybe. If there's no more supply coming online and they can charge exorbitant rates, they're going to do it because they're not a charity. They're in the business. So how do you mitigate that? You have an open free market where somebody else can come online and create a cheaper product, therefore driving the marginal cost down. Okay. So long term, how are they combating this in France? Dumping more and more taxpayer dollars into unprofitable, non-dense green energy. Macron saying, and again, incentive. What are the incentives for an oil company to explore, to create more fossil fuels at cheaper prices? What are the incentives when they're actively, these politicians are actively saying, we want to run you out of business and we're going to subsidize green energy at the wazoo to try to drive you out of business? Because that's not a free market lever, folks. If it was a free market lever, you would choose it. And there's no tax subsidy for choosing it because it's better and cheaper. And that would drive them out of business for sure. Yes. So the budget, which also includes an increase in annual spending on green transition to 40 billion from 33 billion, part of which will go towards transforming France's 2 remaining coal-fired power stations into biomass by 2027, Macron said. So their goal is to drive these companies out of business and at the same time tell them, hey, you can't charge that much. Yes, yes, we want you to drive the prices cheaper. And the way you do that is by bringing more supply online. And the way you do that is by exploring and getting more oil on the market. But just so you know, in 8 years, we want you out of business. Doesn't make any sense. But beyond that, as an individual, I think these are signs of the system, them losing control of the system, right? Because when they keep gumming up the system and they keep distorting the free market by giving subsidies here, printing money here, handing out checks here, and then surprise, everything's more expensive, and then their voters are so ticked off. Remember, in France, I've covered it on this channel, they were raising the retirement age, and people did not like that. But when they have to deal with the reality of the math, this is one thing politicians can't do, is deal with math and scarcity, which is a rule of economics. They're going to make the problem worse because they got to do something. They got to appear to do something. So if you're an observer from afar, this is par for the course, in my opinion. And it's going to get worse. Everything a politician is going to do in the next decade, as some of the problems from overprinting and zero interest rates are going to come to fruition. All right, guys, let me know what you think in the comments below. See you all in the next one. Peace.